Hello and welcome to these interactions once again. We have the one and only Prashant Bhushan with us today. Prashant, as I was telling you earlier, we had published a speech of yours about a year and a half ago. I mean, just around the 2024 elections, and those were the times when when we felt that there was rejuvenation of the democratic spirit in this country. There was this kind of very systematic fight against happening against the authoritarian regime in the center. But now, after the 2024 elections, and now we are moving on to the end of 2025, where do you think those hopes are, and how do you look at the situation?
That kind of rejuvenation before the 24 elections resulted in the BJP losing its majority in parliament. But despite having lost their majority, their power and their ability to do whatever they want remains virtually undiminished, because the two supporting parties are supporting them without any qualification. The BJP has almost doubled down on state repression, on clamping down on free speech, etc., on repressing movements like they are doing in Ladakh. And unfortunately, though there is a lot of discontent in the country and public opinion is totally against, I feel, against the BJP, still we don't see any sort of
Concrete.
ground level mass movement against this regime and for reclaiming the republic and for democratic values, etc. So it is a difficult situation, but yes, we are seeing now growing movements of youth on this paper leaks, etc., of other people, including youth on this whole vote chori campaign. So I feel that there need to be at least two major national movements right now. One on the issue of reclaiming democracy and this situation where we have an election commission which is completely controlled by the BJP and is behaving in a totally dishonest and non-transparent manner, and therefore our whole electoral system is in peril. So we should have and we can have a major national movement about this. And in addition, we should have and can have a major national movement on the issue of unemployment.
Right.
It is a very serious issue across the country, and it's going to become more serious with this coming of artificial intelligence. So these two issues need major national movements. Potential is there, but we need some people to lead those movements.
But who will lead it? That's the biggest question. See, coming to the specific issue of vote chori, which you were saying, see, I have also had occasion to talk to people across the country, especially in North Indian states, where the SIR is now being kind of, Bihar has already had SIR. Now, the process has started in Uttar Pradesh, and I'm told that it is starting in Haryana, Delhi, and all these places as well. But then one thing that that's repeatedly being stated both by the BJP as well as some observers is that unless and until the opposition has people on the ground at the level of the booth to know whose vote has been struck down, how many votes have been added in fictitious addresses and all that. Unless and until you have a mechanism on the ground, how is it possible? And that goes for the movement that also you're talking about. The opposition, see, I grew up in 1970s in college. So I remember the movement between 75 and 77. I mean, we have very, very stark memories of those movements. I mean, how people, there was no social media, there was no television. And still, in spite of that, people communicated and built up that movement. So, what is lacking within the opposition, according to you?
So, unfortunately, electoral politics in India has become increasingly dominated by money. And with the result that there are hardly any political parties who now have real volunteers, political volunteers. They are mostly paid workers. And with the almost control of finances with the BJP and virtually leaving very little for the opposition parties, a lot of opposition parties, most of them are struggling to having to pay, to find and pay booth level agents also.
Right.
And in the absence of that, doing any real proper verification, because the election commission is not being transparent at all. They are not even following their own rules and guidelines. They are not even following their own manual, which requires them to be transparent in many ways. They are not doing that, with the result that all this mischief which is being done with the voters list by way of addition of bogus voters, deletion of genuine voters, etc., this strictly can only be prevented by a vigilant, either vigilant volunteers of the political parties or a vigilant civil society.
Right.
We need a vigilant civil society and a civil society movement rather than a movement by political parties.
Yeah.
So that's what, because the real stakeholders are civil society. They are the people who are being cheated by removing their names or by adding bogus names, etc. It's democracy that is being stolen.
But Rahul Gandhi's latest allegation that this is all being done from a centralized server kind of situation, that adds a greater kind of danger to this whole process, because if it is being done at a centralized level from a system, then how can people track it down on the ground? See, even in the case that he highlighted, it was quite by accident that the person whose name was removed found it out. So this use of technology is also a very important aspect of this.
Yes, yes. So Election Commission has everything which is digitized and centralized. So all information comes to them. They can send out information that look at these 5 lakh people to the voters list, even though they may not be genuine voters of those constituencies, or delete these 5 lakh people from the lists, etc. And in the absence of transparency, you see, the rules require that every application for deletion, every application for addition should be put out on the website. But the Election Commission is not doing that. With the result that suddenly when the voters list is published, you discover that 5 lakh people have been deleted, 5 lakh new people have been added or whatever. And the only way to fight this is for a robust civil society movement to take place, because the Election Commission is not allowing anybody to use computers to analyze what are the additions or deletions that are taking place, when are they taking place, how are they taking place. And with the digital technology, it is possible to do it from a central place. And the Election Commission has become a total stooge of the BJP.
Well, you have had experience with various election commissions as both as a professional lawyer as well as an activist. How would you rate the current election commission in comparison to the past election commissions?
No, this is clearly the worst, but it has been steadily deteriorating in the Modi years. So from Sessions time till the Modi years, Election Commission was largely independent. But after the Modi years, the Modi government has adopted a very studied and deliberate policy of subverting the independence of all institutions. Election Commission is of course the foremost, the judiciary, the media, the CAG, the universities, everything, their independence is being subverted, and they have a very studied policy of how to control these institutions by packing them, primarily by packing them with their own people. So today vice chancellors are nominated by the RSS, and of course CAG is nominated by the government, and they are all stooges. These people, the Election Commission, the CAG, and even in the judiciary, they are preventing independent judges from getting appointed. Whenever the collegium recommends an independent judge, the government just sits on that.
Okay.
And they just don't appoint them.
So now in this context, I would like to move on from the elections, but before we do that, I think what Paragala Prabhagar, social activist, come economist, uh, the perspective that he has been keeping forward now is that that since all these institutions of governance and pillars of democracy are compromised at various levels. He is suggesting that the opposition should boycott the parliament and should resign en masse from parliament. How would you look at a suggestion like that?
Well, it is certainly worth considering, but whether that should be done or not, I feel, should depend upon to what extent we feel and find that the purity of the electoral process has been subverted. Of course, we know that money power today uh, reigns in election matters and money is concentrated with the BJP. We also know that all the instruments of propaganda are with the BJP, but despite that, I find that public opinion is against them. And that's also because they have not yet managed to control the social media or the alternate media.
Not completely, though they have their mechanisms to do it.
Yeah, but they have not succeeded in large measure. So, by and large, the social media, YouTube, etc., is still largely free. So, public opinion is against them. Now, despite all this, now the outcome of the elections will depend on the integrity of the electoral roll and whether people are actually allowed to vote or not. In UP, one of the by-elections, it was found, and it has been established that Muslims were just not allowed to go and vote.
Get out of the houses.
Yeah, there was a kind of police gherao of all those Muslim villages so that they were not allowed to vote. But if the opposition is able to succeed in preventing this from happening, that is large scale tampering with the electoral roll and large scale preventing of people from voting, then I feel that even in these kind of elections, the BJP is likely to lose. Of course, we don't know to what extent they will be able to manipulate the EVMs, but right now there is no major evidence of EVM manipulation, but it is possible that it can be done in future. So it's only when the opposition comes to feel that there is large scale manipulation of electoral rolls and prevention of voters from voting that is happening that I feel that the time would come to boycott the elections. I don't think right now is the time to boycott the elections.
You've been talking about civil society movements, but if you look at the fate or the kind of manner in which the civil society movements, many civil society movements which have come up in recent times, have been tackled by the government. You talked about the students and the exam paper leaks, the competitive exam paper leak, and when students revolted in Eastern UP and Bihar, they were brought down. The kind of they were suppressed very vehemently. Look at what has happened to somebody like Sonam Wangchuk. I mean, somebody who has been celebrated across the world as a model of sustainable development, and the government doesn't think twice before suppressing him or going all out against him and then branding him as an anti-national. So how does what even civil society movements will have to stand up to the might of the government? Do you think it will be possible?
So branding him as anti-national or branding students as paper jihad, etc., that these governments, BJP governments are trying to do is not going to help them very much because public opinion at least has understood that these are all tactics of this government. They are not going to affect public opinion much. But yes, this brutal suppression by way of lathis and preventing people from coming out, imposing curfew, as is done in Ladakh now, arresting the leaders, as they have done with Sonam Wangchuk, etc. This has two things. It results in immediate suppression of the movement, but it also results in anger increasing against the government. And that anger can boil over at any time, as we have seen in Nepal or Bangladesh or even in Sri Lanka. So the government is now playing with fire because this anger cannot remain suppressed for too long. At some point it will boil over. Even if you see what happened in Ladakh, it was a peaceful movement, and Sonam Wangchuk was just leading a peaceful fast and asking only for the BJP to fulfill the promises that they had made of statehood and six scheduled rights, etc. But when tear gas and lathis were used on these peaceful demonstrators who were out on the streets, that led some of them to start throwing stones, after which bullets were fired, many people were injured, and that led to the arson.
No, even the arson, apparently, the fact check sites like Alt News, they seem to suggest that there has been some kind of foul play in the arson also, that it is not a arson that kind of came up from the people. It was, it was triggered by some vested interests who
That's possible, that's possible, but I am not ruling out the fact that some of these, see, because if you are so brutal with peaceful demonstrators that you use tear gas, you use lathis, then you use bullets and kill many of them receive bullet injuries who are in hospital, then anger will boil. And this may have happened, so may not necessarily be foul play organized by the BJP. It may have been some of these people who were in those peaceful demonstrations whose anger boiled over. But Sonam Wangchuk immediately condemned the violence and he said that this will set our movement back. And yet they arrested him, saying that his being out is a threat to peace. I mean, in fact, his being in may become a threat to peace.
Yes.
But certainly his being out would have helped in restoring peace, etc.
So, what is the way forward? I mean, the point is, we have a lot of conceptual ideas in front of us. We have we still do not know if it's going to be a centralized mechanism, and with the election commission being what it is, you don't know how vote chori can be really prevented, whether free and fair elections can take place. We don't know how proper civil society movement can be built up given the factors involved. And we have, of course, on top of it all, Rahul Gandhi's latest press conference has been dubbed by the BJP as something which instigates people to come up or create a Nepal kind of situation. So now the firing on all cylinders continues from the BJP, but the opposition is still kind of not united. They have still not been able to come up on a common agenda. And as you very rightly pointed out, the civil society is yet to come up with a proper agenda of itself. So where do we go from here? What's the way forward?
So I think the answer to these things doesn't lie in political parties, more with civil society. Because political parties over the years have degenerated, even good political parties have degenerated, their workers have been reduced to being paid workers, etc. And therefore, that's unfortunately the nature of electoral politics, power politics in this country, that it has come to depend largely on money. So I feel that now is the time for a robust, rejuvenated civil society to get up and start movements on at least these two issues, that is unemployment as well as the integrity of our electoral process. These two issues are ripe for major civil society movements across the country. They need to be taken up.
These are emotive issues, certainly, but you're also part of a very powerful civil society movement during the last days of the UPA 2 government, especially on the Nirbhaya case, and when somebody like Anna Hazare came and led that. So, civil society movements and their leadership used to have a lot of credibility at that point of time. Do you think that we have that kind of credible leadership now, especially given the fact that people who are part of that movement, you and Yogendra have started a different path. Somebody like Arvind Kejriwal has become also a prisoner of power, as people may say, and Anna Hazare is silent, and his own credibility is being questioned. So, do we will not we need to have a alternative leadership emerging from somewhere?
Yeah, I think, of course, that the manner in which the India Against Corruption movement ended up forming the Aam Aadmi Party, and thereafter that Aam Aadmi Party degenerating into a normal, as corrupt political party as any other party, that certainly set back civil society enthusiasm and activism for some years. But now I think the time has come for it to re-emerge, and we will find new leadership. I mean, Sonam Wangchuk, for example, is an outstanding leader of Ladakh. Similarly, I am sure that other young leaders, good young leaders, can emerge. Uh, there are a lot of good people around, young people around. As I said, unfortunately, that India Against Corruption movement and the manner in which it ended up did dampen the spirits of a lot of our activists. But I think it's been now 12 years since that time, and the time has come for civil society activism to come out of the shadows and take center stage again.
I'll conclude with one last question. This is about the credibility of our political leadership. See, when I interact with people on the ground across various states, including the Hindi heartland, this question of having a people's movement on all these issues, especially issues like unemployment, comes up. But then people also say that the mainstream opposition political parties, they are moving from election to election, and they don't seem to have any concept of having a sustained political movement on the ground on any issue. They say that there are so many issues. Hundreds of rapes are taking place. There are so many issues that people are facing in terms of development and the imbalance in development. But none of these things become an issue for the political leadership of the opposition parties. So, how does one get over that kind of a limitation?
Actually, that is unfortunately a problem with the nature of our electoral politics today, that it does move from election to election and political parties give priority to every election rather than growing the party from its foundations, etc. And over the years, most political parties have been weakened. There are a few good political leaders still. There are some good leaders in the Liberation Party. There are in all, Rahul Gandhi, I feel, is a good political leader. But individual leaders alone cannot lead political parties, cannot ensure that political parties remain true to their original founding objective. And therefore, I feel that we need a lot of democratic reforms in this country of all kinds. We need to remove this first past the post at 2 levels. We need to have proportional representation. To control money power in elections, we need to really implement the limits on election expenses. We need to impose limits on political parties. We need state funding of elections. There are many reforms which
Also,
are required.
internal reform in political parties.
And yes, internal inner party democracy.
I remember when Aam Aadmi Party was, getting to power and all that. I remember having a conversation with Arvind, saying that that you promised internal democracy in parties, but you seem to be moving away from it. He did not respond. But when I talked to some of my friends, that they said no, political parties cannot have that kind of internal democracy because it has to revolve around one leader. See, this is also this perspective that people also have. I mean, normal observers of politics, keen observers of politics, they also have this perspective. But beyond that, I'm still kind of, I have no answer when people ask me, why is it that the political leadership of opposition parties, why are they confined to moving from election to election? I just wanted to ask you one historical question. You have been watching politics for a very long time. When did you think, see, for example, if you look at the experience of political parties in the 75-77 period, they had of course, the BJP was also, Janasangh was also in the opposition at that point of time, but there was some system of, addressing people's issues. So when did that rupture take place? Do you have any idea when that rupture took place? When was it that the political parties?
I think it has happened gradually over a period of years.
Uh-huh.
It has happened gradually. So I don't think we can give any specific point of time when it happened. Gradually, unfortunately, politics has become a game of publicity and image projection and face recognition, and that is why one leader is projected in all these elections, etc. Because unfortunately people recognize that leader and they are the only leader that people recognize, and that's how voting takes place. So we have to have very, very serious, deep-rooted reforms of our whole electoral democratic system in order to deal with all this.
And I think social media also plays a very important part, but that's a totally different discussion. We will do that at some other point of time. But from what we have spoken, I think, Prashant, I think your view is that, that this degradation has taken place over a period of time, but the reparation of that has to happen fast. Am I right?
Yeah, it has to happen fast, and it is to happen by civil society, not so much by political parties.
Thank you very much, Prashant.
Thank you.
We'll continue to interact. Thank you very much for spending time with us.
Thank you, Venkat.